there are a couple offensive linemen that could be going down. And I wanted to ask you because we've established that your favorite player in this draft, if the 49ers, especially if they are looking to be aggressive, would be Mims.
Right.
But I've seen a lot of people also campaigning for Tyler Guyton. And so I thought
Yeah.
maybe you could tell people what you feel like the differences between these two players are. Are either of them more or less ready to play immediately? Because I think, and this is maybe I'm asking two questions in one, but do you think if the 49ers utilize the first round pick in a guy that there's going to be pressure for that guy to start immediately? Because everything I've heard about Mims, and I'm interested to hear if the same is for Tyler Guyton, but is that he might be a guy who needs a little bit of time. But
Yeah.
that could totally be worth it long term if he can take over that right tackle position and then eventually be able to move to the left side once the 49ers lose Trent Williams. So it's not only drafting for this year, but planning ahead as well.
Right.
But in this all in year, last year, Brock Purdy's contract, is there going to be at least fan pressure? Hey, you finally have a first round pick. That guy needs to be on the field day one.
Fans would like that, but Kyle Shanahan isn't likely to do that at offensive line regardless. I mean,
Okay.
they could trade up and get Joe Alt, and maybe he would start day one. He's expected to go in the top 10. But the other tackles after him, Kyle would hesitate to start any of them just because he's Kyle. So you got to factor that in. I think that all of them, the top six that are rated as day one starters, would be capable of doing that. It's just a question of whether Shanahan would let them start. They'd have to prove their way in camp and in the exhibition games to prove that I belong on the field now. That's what the fans want. Is I want somebody to get out there and start. I don't want a pick at 31 and then redshirt the guy and we don't see him for another year. I want this guy to
Yeah.
play, and that's what everybody is hoping. And
Well,
I think that
especially
that's true
in
for
this
the top
all in
six
year.
tackles. Yeah,
It's an
yeah.
all
And
in
if you're
year.
going for the Super Bowl, then you need that. Now with Mims, what's his timeline? He's only played 8 games, so he doesn't have the ideal number of
Yeah.
reps for a season. But when he has played, he's been very effective. He hasn't given up any sacks. He's physically dominant. He does everything well. And so when he does play, he's great. And so the question is, all right, will he stay healthy? That's the risk. The risk isn't that he's only played 8 games. The risk is his health. Because, again, when he's there, he gets it done against the best competition. Georgia's playing
Now
everybody.
his problem so far has been his ankle, right? So,
Yeah,
and he
but
had
he
that
had
tightrope
tightrope surgery.
surgery.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as I know, those ankle injuries, I mean, when we look at, and obviously quarterback is different than offensive lineman, but I know
Yeah.
that Mac Jones and Tua both had those injuries in college and that same surgery, and they were good to go and haven't had continuous ankle problems. So it's
Right.
not like a knee where it's kind of like can be
Yeah.
degenerative,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah. Tightrope surgery is something you can recover from, and a lot of players have.
Okay.
It's just the concern with Mims is he's such a physical freak. Is he too
Heavy on that.
tightly wound? Because he's 6'8", 340. He can run a 5.07 40. He's very fluid and athletic. He's powerful, but he plays really low in terms of his leverage on the field, and so that puts a lot of pressure on the connective tissue, knees, ankles, and that can be a problem. And so long term, you have to evaluate the medicals on Mims. But I think that if you think he can
It
play
is
and
a
remain
scary
healthy,
risk.
it's a risk.
Yeah.
But if you're going to take a risk, it should be on a player like Mims that has all pro potential.
Yeah.
I think that he'll end up being the best tackle in this draft if he plays. Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Joe is the highest tackle that'll be selected, but he's kind of a decathlete. He's good at a lot of stuff, but he's not great in one area. And I think that Mims can overcome him in terms of just highest ceiling. But whether Mims can realize that or not is still up in the air. You got to find out. What are
And
the
also, do the
sellers?
49ers usually go for the higher ceiling players? And when they have, has that, turned out great for them? When it comes to offensive linemen, I feel like they've kind of trended to take the more steady guy, which honestly hasn't worked out great for them. But
Yeah.
also then when I think of them taking a risk on players, that also hasn't worked out great for them. Really just their first round picks in general haven't worked out great for them.
Right. There's a
Kind of
few
no matter what.
that did, but not a lot. And so the question is just, okay, is this worth the risk? I think it is, and it's up to them to evaluate the medical. So comparing him to Tyler Guyton, Guyton is also
And
6'8".
you said really quickly in your article, you did project that they would have to trade up for Mims, but you think that Guyton might fall to them, right?
Or close. And it's Mims is being projected anywhere from like 18 to 28. Guyton is projected more for 23 to 30. So Guyton falls a little bit lower. You would probably still have to move up if you wanted Guyton, but it would be a low trade. You wouldn't have to give up
Okay.
a lot.
So what is the difference between the two players? Why is it seems like they're projected around the same, but Tyler Guyton maybe a little bit lower. Why is that?
Guyton he has the prototypical frame size. He's 6'8", but he doesn't have power. He doesn't have technique. He plays too high. He waist bends. And tackles that waist bend, the Niners haven't liked. Last year, if you remember, Blake Freeland from BYU, 6'7" tackle, another waist bender, they didn't take him. So that could be a bad check mark against Guyton, is that he's also a waist bender sometimes. He needs a lot of technique, but once you get him coached up, then he's got physical potential because he's got the frame, he's got the size, he has everything you would want in terms of just 6'8", long arms, good feet. He has the basics physically, but technique-wise, he's not there yet. So he'd be a project. He's a red shirt. Mims, on the other hand, would be somebody that could start right away.
Was he the one that you were talking about lost a little bit at the pro day or senior bowl?
No, Suamataia is the guy that got beat in the practices at Mobile.
Yeah.
He's also got he's got a lot of power, a lot of great tools because he was a 5-star recruit when he came out of high school, so that's highest level athlete. Oregon recruited him, but he couldn't see the field, and so he transferred to BYU. And they didn't dominate.
Don't get that guy.
Right. And then he dominated where? He didn't. You've got a guy that's a 5-star talent that can play for Oregon, goes to BYU, and he doesn't dominate in the Mountain West. That's a red flag.
Yeah, I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
But okay, so sorry, I was getting Guyton and Sumamante is how you say his name?
Suamataia. Yeah.
There we go. Confused.
Sorry.
But you said that with Tyler Guyton, he is better in pass protection? Or
that's Jordan Morgan. He's the third one of that group. He's from Arizona. He's very good in terms of his competitiveness and his athleticism, but he's better in pass protection than the run game. And so what he does really well is he'll lock onto his man and stonewall him. And that's exactly what you want in terms of pass pro. But in the run game,
he isn't mentioned much.
Yeah. But then for Morgan, in the run game, he'll pivot, create an angle, and then lock onto his man and stonewall again. He doesn't drive a guy off the line. And that's what the Niners want. And so if you say that what's Kyle Shanahan's preference, he's going to say, I want a run blocker first, and I want a run blocker that's going to drive a guy off the line. And that's not Jordan Morgan. So I don't think that they'll take Morgan just because of what Kyle prefers.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you had written down that Guyton, although has like good size and stature and all that, plays too tall, lacks power, and needs to work on his technique. I'm curious, because Mims has had little playing experience, is there enough like data to compare the two? Like, does Mims have better technique in the games that he has played?
Yes. Well, there was tweets on Twitter. Let me look this up. Hold on a second. Bear with me. Brett Coleman. He said, pressure percentage allowed on non-RPO and non-play action pass pro. Amarius Mims, 0.9% pressure allowed.
That's very
Tops
good.
of any tackle. Tyler Guyton, by comparison, 3.7%, so nearly 4 times more.
So it definitely feels like if the 49ers notice the significant difference that we have, that it might be worth it for them to trade up from 31. If they can trade up into like 24, 25, do you think that Mims
If
might be
Mims
there?
will fall that far, there's been some people that are moving Mims back up their boards. He's in the teens in some. In others, he's 23, 25.
Sure.
One had him falling to 30. I think that it's more likely that, I talked to Lance Zierlein from NFL.com. He said that he thinks Mims is 20 to 28. And so within
Okay.
that, if it's, the top end of that from like 20 to 24, it would be the first and the second round pick, maybe a little bit more. And if it's lower, then it can be the first and the third, or at the bottom end of that range of first to fourth and fifth. So there's a variety of things you can do. It's just a question of what do the Niners really want to do. They did talk to Mims at the combine at Indy, so they had a formal interview with him.
Ooh,
And
that's
so they
probably
are
good
interested. They don't have a 30 visit with him, though. So we'll see what happens there.
Okay, I have a second question for you. So when we look at not just the 49ers, but NFL teams in general, it tends to be that in the first round and even in the second round, teams will go for players of need a lot of times, try to get maybe the best player available at a need.
Right.
Where later on in the rounds, it's more of a strategy to go best player available. Now, when you look at the 49ers, they've definitely had a lot more misses in the early rounds than in the later rounds. Do you think it would be smart for them to stay put where they are or to go attack a guy? Like, is it worth it to be aggressive in this case?
I think it
Especially
is.
in a draft like this, which seems to
Exactly.
be much different than previous drafts and maybe even
Yeah.
than drafts to come.
Because this draft is really rare. It's going to set a record for the most tackles taken in the first round. That's
Okay.
a wide expectation that that's going to happen. So if you have a draft like that, then you've got players that can truly take over for Trent Williams. That you've got the rare draft where you've got somebody that actually can take his place. And therefore, I think you should go up and get him. And me being me, I always draw from Walsh. The Niners won the Super Bowl against Miami. What did they do in the next draft? They traded up to 16 to take Jerry Rice.
There
Yeah,
you
if you
go.
know what you're doing, if you know who you're targeting and why, and you really believe in that player, you can be rewarded by going up. But you need to do your research. You need to know exactly what you're getting, and you need to picture what he can do for you. So, the identification of exactly what you want, who you want, is critical.